Hi. Welcome to part 3 of my series on how we form relationships or friendships, where I'm going to be talking about the third attachment style, which is disorganized attachment style. In part 1, if you haven't watched it yet, I spoke about anxious, ambivalent attachment style. In part 2, I spoke about avoidant attachment style. If you started the series, you'll know that I explained that attachment styles are really important in how we form relationships. What we learn in childhood is a guide to how we should be later on when we are now in adult relationships, whether that is friendships or romantic relationships and so on. So that's why I was speaking about these different types of attachment styles. Today, I'm going to be talking about one which is also known as the Fearful-Avoidant attachment style. This one is basically a combination of the anxious and attachment style as well as the avoidant attachment style. So as I'm explaining it, maybe you'll feel, this sounds like something that she has spoken about. And that is simply because it's a combination of the two types of attachment styles, which we already spoke about. Now, what do we expect to see? Before we even get to that, in the same way that I explained avoidant and anxious or ambivalent attachment style by first talking about the parenting style, how is the parent, and what we later see because of the parenting style or the relationship with the parent. So what does it look like in adulthood? So in the same manner that I did or I approached those attachment style, is still the same way that I'm going to even approach this one. So in terms of how the parent is and the parenting style, this is one of the attachment styles that is firstly not as spoken about in comparison to the previous two, and mostly because I think people are trying to understand it. It's a bit confusing for some people, even though some people have established it and they are like, no, this is actually an attachment style that we truly understand. For some people, it can be a bit confusing because it combines those two. But one of the main things that really makes it stand out is that there is an element of fearing the attachment figure, and there's also an element of I want to be close to this person that I fear. So what happens is that usually the child was somebody who could have been exposed to abuse, whether it's personally, different types of abuse, emotionally, physically, sexually, any type of abuse basically, whether it was personal, it was done to them, or they saw the parent or the attachment figure doing that to someone else. So if the attachment figure is the mother and this child sees the mother abusing the sibling or the father, then it causes that fear within this child, because this child feels, this is somebody I want to get close to, but I'm also afraid of them, and then it makes them feel quite confused because they don't know how that parent is going to behave. Are they going to be warm towards them, or are they going to be harsh and rude towards them? In the previous session, or in the previous video, I gave an example of the avoidant where I said that usually we see the parent being, when the child is crying, they rudely stop the child, harshly stop the child and say, stop crying. So even with this one, we see it happening, and that is a way you want to evoke fear within the child. Sometimes it may not be by shouting at the child. Sometimes it could be, giving that child a look, that no, you should stop crying. If you don't stop crying, you're going to get the punishment, and the punishment is the worst. So it really brings about that fear in a child, where they don't know, should I cry because if I cry my mother is going to scold at me, she's going to shout at me, or there's going to be a negative punishment or there's going to be a punishment as a result of my behavior. So this child really becomes confused, and then this behavior goes on even into their relationships. And one of the main things that I should mention is that this child feels, if a person who I love so dearly can abuse me, what should I do? So that confusion causes the child not to be trusting, because they're like, oh, if a person who I really love this much and I want to be close to can abuse me, am I even safe? And so they move around the world feeling that they're not safe. I'm not safe. The person that should be making me safe isn't making me safe. And so we then see later on in their relationships, they struggle with trust. They want to be in relationships, they want to be in friendships, but there's an element of trust that's always going to keep them from experiencing the relationship fully or enjoying it, because they fear that if this person who I'm giving myself to, in terms of my intellect, I'm letting them into my space, if this person who I'm allowing into my space can hurt me, what's going to become of me? So they then fear that, maybe I shouldn't pursue the relationship even though I want to pursue it. So there's that trust. One of the other things that we then see is that they really have unresolved emotions. They struggle to resolve their emotions. They could be struggling with something that happened way back in childhood, and they haven't resolved that emotion because they don't know what to do with the emotion. Should I just expose myself to somebody who's possibly not going to make me feel safe? What do I do with this emotion? And so they have a lot of unresolved emotions. So sometimes you may see them struggling with anger, because one of the other things is that they don't know how to regulate their emotions as a result of these unresolved emotions. So we see them struggling quite a lot with anger, with the negative emotions quite a lot. And as a result, we can then see these people being abusive in their relationships and being quite dysfunctional in their relationships. And this is because they simply don't know what to do. They don't have a foundation of, when I'm feeling this way, what do I do with my emotions? Remember, our attachment gives us the basis, the foundation of later on in my life, when I'm exposed to a conflict, when I'm exposed to a feeling, to an emotion, what do I do with it? So because this child's basis or foundation it's confusing, they too turn out to be quite confused. And sometimes the only way that they can regulate or to take out that emotion is by doing something that is dysfunctional, maybe by being abusive, maybe by being angry all the time. And that is simply because of the foundation that they were not provided with. Okay, and one of the other things that we see is that they a lot of times they struggle to remember their past experiences, and that is because they've just taught their mind to forget those painful experiences because they're traumatic to them. So sometimes you may hear the person saying, I really don't remember much about my childhood. And that's because a lot of times when we are in a space where we are not safe, our brain or our mind tends to protect us by saying, I'm not going to remember this part because it doesn't make me feel safe. I'm not going to remember it. I'm going to put it out of my awareness because it makes me feel scared. It makes me shake, and it doesn't make me function right now. So I'd rather forget it. So the other thing that we also see is that they tend to dissociate to avoid the pain, where they just try to forget everything. They try to detach from things because they know that could be quite painful, and they lack empathy and remorse. Remember, our attachment gives us a basis of what we are going to do in our relationships. If the person who is my attachment figure did not show me any empathy or any remorse after doing something bad, it's not surprising for me as a child who doesn't know anything to then do the same thing to someone. So a lot of times we see that they lack empathy, and then they also show that remorse. And that is simply because they didn't know, they were not provided with that foundation of how to deal with, how to be empathic towards someone, how to show remorse when you have hurt someone. And then we also see them being quite narcissistic, very loosely defining the term. They think the whole world revolves around them. And this is just basically to heighten their sense of self and self-importance, because somebody didn't give them that opportunity to feel important. So the only way that they know how to feel important is by making themselves important and not showing any remorse or whatsoever. So, with this one, you will realize that it's quite sad that the same patterns that we learned in our attachment can be repeated. I was reading an article, I can't remember who said it or who wrote it, but they were saying that with this type of attachment style, one of the things that really makes it prominent is the fact that we don't turn to change how we parent. So chances are that the parent to whoever, we learn through association basically, or we learn through observation, we learn through other people. So chances are that if a caregiver observed that being done to someone, they are possibly going to repeat that and think that's a healthy way of responding to a child's needs, or just taking care of a child. So it's quite unfortunate that a lot of times we tend to repeat habits that are not really helpful without realizing that these are quite harmful to my child. So with this one, if you find yourself in a space where you feel, I could be having a disorganized attachment style, and it's quite frustrating for me because I want to be in relationships, but I really just can't trust people. And for me, it's not a trust that somebody did something to me. It's just a trust that comes automatically. The person may have not done anything. I automatically just struggle to trust someone because I think it could be an attachment style of mine, because I see this pattern even in other relationships. So if you find yourself in such a space feeling that, I really think I identify with this style, or even with any of the other style, and you realize its impact in your relationships, in your friendships, I mean, this is something that can be attended to in therapy when you work with somebody who's going to provide a safe space for you, who's going to, help you to change the stories or the memories, or to even change your understanding of the traumatic memories that you have of childhood. So it's quite important for you to reach out to a psychologist who will be able to help you to resolve some of these issues. Unfortunately, some things which were done to us, and there's nothing that we can do. But in terms of what we are going to do for ourselves and to other people, that is our responsibility. So if you realize that your attachment styles have been any of the three insecure ones, and you feel you want to change them, then I would like to encourage you to really do go for it and seek help, so that we can really have healthy relationships. We can learn how to deal with conflict in a way that is not destroying of relationships, and also learn so that in the future, when you find yourself being a parent, whether you've been a parent before, you want to start healthy attachment styles with your kids that are going to come after. So this is the last of the insecure attachment styles. I am going to be talking then next week about the secure attachment style, which is what we ultimately want to get to. We want to move away from being insecure to being secure. And remember, even though we could have been rooted in insecure in our childhood, we can help ourselves so that we can now get to a secure attachment for your current relationships and your relationships to come. So that's what I'll be talking about. If you enjoy, click the like. If you haven't subscribed and you're watching, please subscribe and then turn on that notification bell. And I'll see you next time when I talk about secure attachment style. Thank you so much. Bye.